that we'll understand the, we'll have a common basis for our discussion. Then also highlight the complexity. So that comes together, like transport sector. It's very basic aspect, but also there's a complexity within that. Then we go into more towards the today's topic, the sustainable development and its related relation to transport. Then we go into sustainable transport systems. Then, of course, the education for sustainable transport. And I will conclude with some key remarks. So those are the areas under which I'm going to cover my presentation. It will take around 50 to 60 minutes, 1 hour to complete this. Now we look at the transport, which involves movement of people, goods, and information. Thus, it gives rise to mobility, accessibility, and connectivity. In fact, what we need is not transport. What we need is mobility, accessibility, and connectivity, for which we extend. We can avoid transport by planning in different way. For example, today's discussion, we are doing it now online. So that's the way we prevent transportation, physical transportation. So therefore, what we need is the connectivity. So here we are connecting through internet. So likewise, transportation, we talk about transportation in the context of movement of people, physical movements, but then it's not necessary to have a mobility or accessibility or connectivity. So therefore, the transportation, usually we call mobility, is more broad aspect. So therefore, when you're understanding transportation, we have to understand this mobility, accessibility, and connectivity, which is in fact give rise to the need for transport. And we look at the mobility, accessibility, connectivity, including transport, is a fundamental element in human society. It's part of our life. So we have to understand the transportation in that context. So when you look at the modern the economic processes, the development processes, these have been accompanied by a significant increase in transportation modes as well as activities, and enhancing in mobility. So therefore, there's a strong connection between the economic development and transportation. I will just show you a few examples. So this indicates for selected countries, the horizontal axis, the GDP per capita, that's the economic development. Vertical axis, basically the passenger kilometer is given in 1,000 kilometers per capita per year. That is per person per year, how many kilometers in 1,000 given there. So we can see all the countries, there's a trend, like when you increase the economy, that the GDP is increasing, then we have an increase in mobility or transport. That means basically, of course, that rate of increase in transport with the GDP varies from country to country. There are certain countries which have higher rates, other one lower rate. But in general, we can see when you have economic development, there will be more transportation. Or the other way, to achieve more economic development, you need more transportation. But in fact, what we really need is some more mobility. But unfortunately, we are using transport as a means of getting mobility. So this one important aspect means that our economic development are strongly coupled with transportation or mobility. Now these countries where you can't see Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka will lie in a very narrow region. So I have plotted in separate diagram. So this is Sri Lanka. Here same diagram, GDP per capita and vertical passenger kilometer per capita per year. So we can see again, when we have higher GDP, the per capita, the movement, here is a passenger kilometer. Similar relations are there for even for fleet transport, tons kilometer, very similar relations. So we can see there's a strong coupling between the movement of people or transportation with economic development. So in that context, the important role played by transportation in socioeconomic development is apparent. So therefore, for socioeconomic development, we need mobility, and mobility is provided by transportation mainly. So therefore, we have to understand the transport system to understand its broader context. So one way of understanding transport system is basically the transport start with the demand. So there's a demand for mobility or demand for transportation. So that those are usually evolve around the nodes which provide the transport, the facilities. And then there are networks, the road or other networks, which connect these different the nodes. So when you combine these demand nodes and networks, you get a transport system which provide the transport for goods, people, and information. So all together. So that's one way of interpreting transport system. So when you look at this type of interpretation, you see a kind of a complexity. But in fact, that complexity go beyond this transport system, because these are interlinked with other systems too. And therefore, all these components in the transport system also connected with diverse economic, social, and environmental systems. So therefore, therefore, if you want to understand the transport system, it's not just transport system. You have to understand under the area within which the transport system works. So in that context, this become more complex interrelation. That's model later on. But quickly, I will highlight this the basic concept like transport modes. There are different types of modes: road, railway, aviation, and water and marine. Then we use different even non-motor transport also used there, like cycling, walking, or animal power, which is not is less used now. Then technology, especially motorized, IC engine is the most common. Then we have gas turbine, which are used mainly in aircrafts. Then we have electric motor, which are used now more and more in electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, and also railway electrification systems. Also, we have electrification there. Then we have external combustion engine, like steam engine or Stirling engines, which are also used in transport. Then we look at the energy source for transport is basically transport fuels like gasoline, diesel, or other the fossil fuels are used. Then we have natural gas like CNG or LPG or LNG or LPG. Now we are using electricity to drive electric motors, it's with electric vehicles. Hydrogen is a future fuel or technology which can be used for IC engine, or it can use with fuel cells. Then of course we also talk about biofuels like ethanol, which is a replacement for the gasoline or petrol. Or biodiesel can be replacement for normal diesel, and also biogas are also used for transport. So those technologies are available, commercialized, though in Sri Lanka we don't see biofuels or hydrogen use. So when you look at the transport, I also indicate that there's a complexity there because transport work in a broader socioeconomic dimensions. So therefore it also connected to other economic sectors, as well as the broader context of the like society and environment. I will just show you a few information based on Sri Lankan context. This shows the historical growth of active vehicle fleet in Sri Lanka. These are the vehicle fleet which are operational on the road. So now I think today it's like 6 million. This data is given till 2018. So now this data indicate not only the vehicles, but also it indicate how the vehicle use has been evolved over the time. That will provide information for us to plan for the future or understand the transport sector. So that is not just numbers, but it indicates the character in our transport sector. So here we can see that two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and cars contribute to more than 80% of our vehicle fleet. So that's these are small vehicles that also reflect in kind of a less efficiency in the transport sector. So we can go into a bit more detail by analyzing further in terms of the number of vehicles that's shown in the first diagram. Active vehicle fleet in say 5 million, out of that 55% are motorcycle, three-wheelers 20%, motor cars like 12%. So I said altogether it's more than 80%. The balance is provided by others. But when you look at the transport service provided by the vehicles, that's basically when you look at the passenger kilometer, we had around 200 billion passenger kilometer in 2018 approximately, which basically around 43% provided by buses. See here, the only 1.08% of buses provide the mobility for 43%. So that itself sees the kind of a pathetic situation in Sri Lanka that the 80% of the vehicles provide less than maybe 50% of the mobility. So therefore we have to think rationally when we take in the policy decision. So therefore this data provide us or any person to understand better or to comprehend better the transport sector. Another diagram I just show there is the growth of the transport sector and this impact on other areas. We have already seen its impact on economy. This also indicate here. So this is shows the historical development of the transport sector. This ash color line shows the number of vehicles. I said that in 2018 when beyond 5 million. So this ash line. This the blue line is the GDP per capita. We can see therefore a number of vehicles and GDP per capita are strongly linked. So we can see how the economy is driven by vehicles. Then we can also look at the passenger kilometer, which also increase with the number of vehicles as well as GDP. But more importantly, now this last red line shows a passenger kilometer per vehicle normalized to 2000 value. We can see over the years, in Sri Lanka, when we look at the number of vehicles, that's increased. Passenger kilometers also increased, but the passenger kilometer per vehicle, that is a vehicle, supporting the mobility, is coming down. Meaning that we are now going, less efficient, direction, because we are moving from mass transport like public transport to individual transport. So this trend is a negative, indicator to when you look at the development. Although we have GDP growth, this particular red line indicate that our transport sector is not growing in that context. There's no, there's a growth in vehicles, or there's a growth in passenger kilometer, but there's no growth in sustainability or growth in efficiency. So this is another good indicator for us to understand our transport sector, because we feel that the issue of the transport sector, these are the numbers which indicate what's the directions we are moving. So therefore, this indicate we need rational changes in our policy making to reverse this trend. We have to have this red line going upward direction, which indicate the more resource efficiency. This another one which indicate the fuel consumption in transport. Both diesel and petrol are shown here. Now here it's not only of course we can see there's an increase in fuel consumption that is basically impact on energy sector. Of course that also impact on economy also, because we import all this fuel from foreign countries. So there's a adverse impact on our this economy. But then of course we can also see this trend. Now here we can see initially there's a growth in diesel consumption. Then there's a kind of a decrease in the rate. And earlier when the diesel consumption is going up, the petrol consumption rate is quite low. But now when the diesel consumption went down, we can see there's an increase in petrol consumption, because diesel consumption are basically linked to the public transport as well as good transport. Petrol vehicles or consumption are linked to basically passenger transport by two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and cars. So we can see, therefore, again the negative trend that we are moving more towards motorized transport, small passenger individual vehicles that will have a very negative impact, adverse impact on the whole economy, which will have a challenges in even sustained development. So I will come back to that one later on when we talk about sustainable development and transport. So then these are based some examples from Sri Lanka. So we can see that not only Sri Lanka, this is very common in all of the world, especially for developing countries. Therefore, the dependence of energy sector on fossil fuels has led to much spoken issues such as resource depletion one side, and also environment degradation, because we use combustion for energy generation through fossil fuel. That will have not only energy generation but also adverse impact on economy. So therefore this is transport is linked to, for example, energy sector, but it go beyond that, because there's a impact on environment. So therefore, environment degradation is also a key issue. Therefore, the transport sector is interconnected with many other sectors and which have adverse range of adverse impacts. So that's so therefore, when you look at this complexity, it's go beyond even this environment or energy. Another aspect is basically when you look at the like the mobility, as I said earlier, the demand for mobility basically is required for development, but then usually Sri Lanka or any country, they get the mobility through motorization or transportation, which use petroleum. So we know with that we have the direct cost and also indirect cost, and especially we have external costs, bared by the society, especially through environmental impacts. These costs are not usually considered in economic evaluation or decision making. We usually consider these internal or direct costs. So that will have a very since we don't have information on external costs, the decision we make based on the facts we have are usually not rational, because we are dependent on only partial cost estimation. For just example, this just one indicator. This indicate that different cost element, like what you call life cycle costing of a car. This is basically calculated in 2007. We can see usually we pay for the direct cost, like the internal cost, maybe the first cost, as well as the variable internal cost. Basically talk about the petrol or diesel consumption, and also repairs and maintenance and so on. But then when you look at the overall costing, when you include the externalities, including the social and environmental impacts, that will have more than 1/3 of the total cost. But these costs are usually not captured in our decision making. So therefore, in the transport sector, the way we take the decisions are not supportive for especially sustainability. So therefore, that's why we need transformational change or new way of handling transport sector or analyzing the transport sector. Now, when you look at impacts, as I said, it's much broader than direct impact. There are many things: congestion, air quality, noise and vibration, accidents. Then we have climate change issues, the natural habitats, the like biosphere, the impacts. Then waste issue is there, waste disposal, loss of living spaces, visual intrusion, and so on. So there are many impacts. So therefore, again, among these impacts, we really discuss very few. Many of the impacts are, although we know that there are impacts, we don't have tools to, we don't have data or information to analyze it. We don't have tools to do that. So therefore, unless we do that, then you don't understand the transport sector properly. So therefore, if you want to understand the transport sector properly, we have to understand these concepts also, at least qualitatively. Of course, the quantitative thing may be difficult, but it's required. But then at least understanding should be there. So these areas. So therefore, when you talk about even the transport sector education, we have to look at which areas we want to prioritize within the educational plan or a particular target group. So you can't teach everything, but then you have to understand these areas are also important. And look at the dynamisms of the transport sector, as we look at earlier, this multifaceted and interconnected character make it very complex, especially in the urban sector. There are many governing factors like urbanization and urban-rural integration there, especially in Sri Lanka. Our urbanization is different because our urbanization happened not in urban sector alone, because our urban facilities are going into the rural sector. So therefore, in Sri Lanka, urbanization occurs in even rural areas. And therefore, these issues we talk about here in transport sector is not limited to cities. It's go beyond that, especially in Sri Lanka, because our urbanization happened in even rural areas. So likewise, there are many different aspects which have to be captured. Demographic changes, global supply chains and trade routes, digital connectivity. The ICT is becoming a very determined factor for the future, especially with the COVID, this pandemic situation and lockdown. You have seen the way the digital connectivity work. So that's another area of intervention we can see. And also we are looking at now greener, more efficient technologies and processes, which has become a requirement, a fundamental requirement for sustainable development. So therefore, transport has become a complex system and need holistic approach to mitigate the adverse impact while optimizing the benefits and trade-offs. That's why we have to capture this one in education, because the transport sector actors or any person involved in transport sector, their competencies are built on our education program. So unless we taught these aspects, then this transport sector access will not make the correct decision. So therefore, the education for sustainable transport become a very important aspect by capturing all these complex issues. But when you look at what happened so far, it generally, in overall, even today, it fails to capture above this aspect. Sadly, even today, the way we make the decision are not aligned with this the complex aspect and trying to see the sustainability within transport sector. So therefore, as Sri Lanka, we need a transformational change in all the aspects. So one way of understand this complexity is basically map the mobility and transportation within this broader context of biosphere. Now remember that we are part of the biosphere. So biosphere contains 4 spheres: the atmosphere, air, hydrosphere, water, then lithosphere, the land or soil. Then we are ecosphere, plant and animal, which are part of that. So that's the biosphere, that's the environment. But when you look at our presence within the ecosphere as an animal, or rather human as an animal, our interaction with all this environment or biospheres are much more connected or dominant than other elements. So therefore, when you look at the environment, it's not just air, water, land, or ecosystem. It includes many elements which are created by humans, like urbans and cities, human settlements, and our governance and institutions, human behavior and lifestyles, demand growth, market forces, population dynamics, invention, innovations, technology advancements, and then of course the impact on the environment like climate change, resource consumption, land use change. There are many. So therefore, we have to understand even the transport within this broader the environment sphere. So that's what I've shown here. So we can see here the mobility and energy also mapped there. So therefore, it's not just transport alone. It linked to energy. It linked to many other areas. So therefore, the transport is a much broader subject. So when you look at these elements, transport is not just technical area. It's become much broader. Any discipline, any education, from early childhood education to university or school, this transport become a education area to be look at. So therefore, our education transport sector or sustainable transport is not just for universities. It should be a part of our what you call the lifestyle, skills. So therefore, the context under which I'm discussing here, the education, go beyond our emphasis on university or tertiary education, but then it has to be captured in a broader context. So therefore, what you see there is the interconnectedness and also multi-facets, multi-sectoral, and involvement of multi-stakeholders, the complexity. So when you look at that aspect, these complex issues have been captured and elaborated, and a solution framework have been developed through the concept of sustainable development. So therefore, you can find a solution to this transport in a complex environment through sustainable development goals or sustainable development framework itself, because the sustainable development also will have the similar complexity and similar elements. So in that context, though we see a very complex situation in transport sector, it also provides for us to have entry points to tackle many other challenges we face. Maybe health, maybe development challenges, So we can make use of transport or mobility to tackle the broader context of sustainable development. So therefore, what I see here is my interpretation there is, of course, it's complex, but that complexity provides us a tool for using transport, especially sustainable transport, to resolve many other challenges we face in towards sustainable development. So that's the link, the basic the principle behind the education for sustainable transport. So in that context, this issue has been elaborated, as it is by global community for a long period, and they have come up with many global agendas which can be used as determinants for us to shape our transport sector. So one of the key, most widely spoken, global agendas in that context, that you are aware that one is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the related sustainable goals, the targets and indicators, which is implemented from 2015-2030. Then we have Paris Agreement and for climate action, and we have what we call national determined contribution. These are linked to the climate change issue, targeting reduction in carbon, which are being implemented now, which is of course put forward in 2016, where we also signed that agreement. We declared our national contribution, but then it's under implementation now. The implementation period is 2020 and 2030, 10-year period. So we are into that action now. So both these SDGs and NDCs are active now. So therefore our interventions can be linked to these actions. So we look at the progression in localization of these SDGs and NDCs, especially 2030 Agenda. We have what we call policy and strategy on sustainable development, which has been now developed in a draft version, about to submit to the cabinet. That's also provide different agencies, institutions to shape their day-to-day life or the activities towards sustainability, which is called mainstream SDGs, which is being done now in government institutions. The basic integration of these SDGs towards national and local plans or institutional plans. So that's happening now, which is basically driven by Sustainable Development Council. So when you look at these localized SDGs, I just want to highlight some of the targets set by the transport sector, which itself indicate the broader context of sustainability. So those are some of the indicators which are linked to transport. So our sustainable development goals, these are our goals. We are localized one. One of the target is by 2030, reduce the number of deaths and injuries of road accidents by 20%. Now it's like presently we have, I think, 8 to 9% die per day on average. So so this target is to reduce by only 1/5. So I don't know whether it's aggressive, but I think this may be the achievable one. So we are talking about achieving maybe 7 or maybe 5 or 6 deaths per day. That's our target, because the present value is 8 or 9. So but then that value may not be, you can't say sustainable, because if you have 5 or 6 deaths per day, that is not a sustainable living. So therefore this target has to be, of course, I think more aggressive, but I think these are maybe the achievable target. 2030, the second one, realize 20% energy saving through energy efficiency improvement, covering all the sectors, but transport is the one sector. But this may be also challenging, because presently we are having the trend in a negative direction. We are not improving energy efficiency, we are having a reduction in energy efficiency. So even 20% in improvement, all these 20% is also, I think, it's important because it's maybe challenging. But then this value 20% is not really, you can't say sustainable thing, but still it may be achievable, one. We also talk about promoting, the alternative fuels like electric vehicles, using solar PV, biofuels, hydrogen, especially looking at 10% contribution. Then it talk about the transport infrastructure development, and also talk about this access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport system for all. So we can see there are sustainable development goals, the targets and indicators set by Sri Lanka towards 2030, which are linked to within transport sector, but talking about more broader context of sustainability. So the other one is basically the climate action, which is the Paris Agreement we have signed. We are binding for that agreement. and we had declared our NDCs in 2016. Presently, it has, these NDCs have been updated, especially in mitigation sector. There are different targets. We have 5 areas. Transport is one area. In 2016, we have declared that we are going to have a reduction in about 10% with respect to business as usual case, the carbon emission, that the target set in 2016, but now it's under revision, which is about to finalize. I think the target is not set yet because of lack of data, but I think probably we can achieve a maximum maybe 10% reduction. So this is again happening now, where deliberation in transport sector is also is there. So both SDGs and NDCs. So NDCs, these are the actions identified in the transport sector to reduce carbon emission. The target is around 10%, which is not quantified yet. So I hope that it will be around 10% with respect to the usual case. So there are many interventions there. We can say around 13 interventions, national determined contribution we are looking at. Each will have certain contribution. Total contribution will be around 10% reduction. So this again talk about many diverse intervention, including transport, public transport improvement, then of course non-motor transport, then talk about taxation also there, then electric mobility, many even road infrastructure and so on, even marine and the water transport also highlighted there. So therefore we have some policy directions for transport sector, but still the activities in that one is not in place yet, but at least we have some policy directions. So therefore, the context under which we have discussed now is the transport and sustainable development. So we are trying to capture transport within sustainability. So then only we can understand this sustainable transport system. So therefore, first I want to interpret transport as a part of SDGs. Most of you are aware that in 2030 agenda, we have 17 sustainable goals. And 160 targets and 240 indicators approximately. So here there are some core principles which are in fact linked to the transport to universal, no one leaving no one behind, interconnected and indivisibility that we discussed, inclusiveness and multi-stakeholder partnership. And the SDGs are better understand by the 17 goals can be grouped under what we call 5 P's: planet, people, prosperity, peace, and partnership. 5 P's. The planet means basically environment, people means society, prosperity means economy. The 3 dimensions of sustainability, that is basically what all we understand. But in addition, SDGs also highlight the importance of partnership, the teamwork, the partnership, learning from others and so on. And also peace. Peace also talk about the institutions and their, the support for, peace and other, the development. So therefore, the partnership and peace or the institutions also reinforce the sustainability dimension. That's where SDG, become very important intervention to be achieved under these 5 P's. So that's the way the SDGs have been, developed. In fact, that's the way the transport also can be, sustainable transport can be interpreted. So in that context, when you look at the SDGs, when you go into detail there, I'm not going to discuss here in detail, but when you go into these sustainability goals, the 17 goals, 169 targets and 240 indicators, you can identify some key attributes for sustainable transport system: safe, affordable, accessible, efficient, resilient, and minimum emission, means environmentally sound. So those are the attributes of sustainable transport system, or basically the definition for sustainable transport system. It should be safe, affordable, accessible, efficient, resilient, and sustainable, what you call environmentally sustainable. So that is the way you can define sustainable transport within the sustainable development agenda. So the sustainable transport system in that context can be we can develop the concept more strategically by setting these objectives in line with 5 P's of SDGs. The same line, the global community, especially UN agencies, has come up with approach objectives for sustainable transport system, which are called 5 I's and 5 C's. 5 I's basically represent the areas for action: infrastructure, innovation, integration, intelligence, and investment are the areas for action to meet the needs for sustainable transport. Clients, clients, centers, corridors, congestion, and complementarity. These are also elaborated with descriptions, which are called 5 C's. So therefore, in line with SDGs, the way you define or try to define the sustainable transport system is by implementing activities through these 5 I's and achieving the needs through 5 C's. So when you look at this, that will basically define what we have to do within sustainable transport system. So we look at this aspect, we can see the broader context of sustainable transport system, which go beyond the technical areas. There are many other, disciplines and other sectors get involved. So therefore, the sustainable transport is not just an area for engineering or technology. It go beyond that. It go for any profession, any part of the society. One or the other, these elements will be applicable. So therefore, you can define strategies for sustainable transport system. These are well elaborated for even before 2015 when this SDGs came up. This aspect have been identified. But with the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, now these have been grouped and framework or rather arranged in more the logical way. So again, this shows the areas under which we have to tackle transport system. Land use planning. So it's when we plan the cities, when we plan the human settlement, we look at the transport aspect. Then public transport planning and transport demand management, non-motor transport, people-friendly infrastructure, cleaner fuels and vehicles or energy efficiency aspect, road safety and maintenance, air quality monitoring, modeling, assessment at the impact side, air quality, vehicle emission control, standards, inspection, maintenance, public health, that the health aspect, noise, safety, social equity and gender perspectives, knowledge management. So that's where the education come in there. I am to elaborate more on that one later on. The knowledge management is a key to achieve all the other things. We need the competence, people. That's why we talk, on this education. So therefore, this aspect has been elaborated, and we can find these type of approaches in many, the global interventions. Even in Sri Lanka, we are following this type of a, framework. So basically, this overall approach, as I said, now it's now formulated under more strategy framework, which in transport sector we call avoid, reduce, shift, improve approach. AIS approach: avoid, improve, and shift. These are hierarchical way of managing transport system to become a more sustainable transport system. We have a hierarchical way of managing transport system. What he says is that the first intervention we have to look at is to reduce or avoid travel or need to travel, but without sacrificing the mobility. That's the first one thing. We avoid or reduce travel, but not the service. We will have the required mobility, we will have the required connectivity, we have the required accessibility, but without moving. So that's what we mean. That's the first intervention. That's the most effective way we call system efficiency improvement. That where we even use of ICT is one example, like what we are doing now. This virtual, the platform and so on. So many other things. We can use this one for even for that even for the good transport, supply chains. During the COVID lockdown, we have used this one. So that's one aspect, but without sacrificing the development. So the second one is, let's say we can't avoid movement. We have to move from point A to point B, node A to node B. When we want to move, of course, we have to move, but then we pick a correct, most efficient mode. That's what we call the shift. Shift from less efficient mode to more efficient mode. For example, individual vehicle to a bus, or bus to rail, or maybe vehicle to motor transport to non-motor transport, all these shifts will indicate better efficiency, less pollution. So then the third one is what you call the improve. So let's say if we want to go from A to B, there's no choice. We have to go by a car. You don't have bus or you don't have other facilities. You can't walk, for example, or cycle. Then we have to go by car. But then we make sure that that car is efficient. One way is we can go by not petrol diesel car. We can go hybrid car, or we can go for electric vehicles. So that way we look at the vehicle efficiency. So likewise, even IC engine, we can promote the efficiency, high efficient vehicles. So that's the third one. So when we combine these three, then we get most efficient transport system, not only resource efficiency, that also indicate the environmental sustainability. So that's the framework under which we tackle the transport system under sustainable development. So therefore, when we have education program, we have to taught the transport sector any subject within this framework. I'm not saying that we have to teach everything, but then this is a very fundamental thing we have to teach for everyone. The selected target group, which we have to elaborate more because we can't teach everything for everyone. But then some of the fundamentals we have to capture. I just want to show that some of the interventions now happening in the world which drive the transport sector. I've shown that earlier that for the sustainability, we look at the environment side, and we have the fuel economy side, the efficiency. This is the interventions which evolve to sustainable development goals by looking at the resource efficiency. For transport sector, we call fuel economy. So with the SDGs, UN has also initiated the global intervention called Sustainable Energy for All, SE for all, that's the short term, which are implemented for 5 sectors, where one sector is transport. In the transport sector, the basic target is to double the fuel, the improvement in the fuel economy or the efficiency by 2030. So that's the target. In the transport sector, which is basically this, the approach is elaborated by an agency called Global Fuel Economy Initiative, and which is also linked to a center called the Copenhagen Center for Energy Efficiency, C2E2. Their work in this direction to double the fuel economy or the fuel efficiency. The target set in 2010 is to double the fuel economy of light duty vehicle like cars and other small vehicles from 2005 to 2030. For example, the average fuel economy of a vehicle, a new vehicle we had in 2005, it is 8 liters per 100 kilometers. To drive 100 kilometers, it needs 8 liters. The target set for 2030 is 4, half of that. So that's the target. But presently, the target has not been achieved so far. So we have more aggressive target, and especially with the COVID situation, this target is becoming more and more difficult. So therefore, now these targets are set for carbon emission and also targeting this to limit the global warming, meaning that we are going to have more issues in the future in terms of climate change, because transport sector and also other sectors, we are not achieving what we need. So therefore, for example, carbon emission, we had 180 gram per kilometer in 2005. The target is 90. We can see still we are not reaching that one. So there are more aggressive targets now are being set. Now this is set in 2015, but now we have more aggressive targets just before the COVID. They have come up with more aggressive targets. Now we look at these targets now because of the Paris Agreement. This target for climate change, it requires to limit the temperature increase below 2 degrees centigrade for our survival for human society. We need 65% of reduction of the carbon emission in the transport sector. So for 2005, which require increased fuel economy of vehicle technologies like IC engine, faster transition to electric vehicles, faster decarbonization of the electricity grid. If the grid is high carbon, then there's no gain in electric vehicles, and also additional avoid and shift measures. For example, non-motor transport and so on, and also public transport. So when you look at this aspect, we can see there are a lot of challenges ahead. And it shows that, in fact, to achieve the target by 2050, we have to decrease the carbon emission in our grid by 90%, meaning that most of the energy generation by 2050 should be from renewable energy. But when you look at there's a tendency, but then that is not aggressive enough to reach that. So meaning that when you look at the present development targets or the progression, we are not going to achieve this target like 22 degrees centigrade limit. We are going to go beyond that. So that is a real challenge for the human survival because our direction is not towards the target set. Now, in the sector, there are more targets set in the global community. This was set in 2019. For other sectors, like now the target set by 2050 is 90% reduction, as I said earlier. For heavy duty vehicle is 70% reduction by 2050, 35% reduction. Buses, these are intercity buses, 65%, 95% reduction, carbon reduction. And then two-wheelers, three-wheelers, we are talking about 80% reduction by 2035 in 15 years or 95% reduction by 2050, meaning that most of the vehicles has to be electric or maybe hydrogen vehicle or something like that. So therefore, these targets are set for the vehicle industry to achieve this carbon reduction target to limit the global the warming or temperature rise below the 2 degrees. There are some example in Sri Lanka. There are some actions in Sri Lanka. We know that hybrid and electric vehicles have been promoted. So we can see there are a lot of hybrid came in. We have now 150,000 hybrid, which is higher than diesel vehicle. But electric vehicles, we have cars around 4,000 cars, altogether around 7,000 electric vehicles, including two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So the electric vehicles are not really promoted in Sri Lanka because there are other barriers. So therefore, the reaching the targets I said earlier may be challenging for us. Then we look at the fuel economy values. These are some of the information we did or studies we did to see the impact of this hybrid. So we can see this yellow one shows our average fuel economy in our fleet. This light duty vehicle. But then when you look at the impact of hybrid, it's a considerable. We are able to reduce around 15% of our emission due to this hybrid importation. But then we look at the targets in 2030 is the red line, and target for 2050 is the green line. So we are not going towards that. Of course, we are not a vehicle manufacturing country, but we are importing it. So when we are importing, we have to make sure that we import better fuel economy, better efficient vehicles to reach these targets. These are global targets, not local targets, but then we are also part of this issue. So therefore, we have to somehow see how we can reach the target while the global community are moving towards that. Emission. What I have shown that the PM10 and PM2.5 concentration in Colombo during 2019 before COVID, 2020 during COVID. So we can see the red line, the during COVID, the blue line, the before COVID. So we had an issue of our air pollution, air quality, both 2.5 and PM2.5, both were higher than WHO standard, of course, slightly less than most of the time Sri Lanka standard, but then we were like a marginal. But during the COVID, we can see our values has in fact go beyond even WHO standard, been very clean, and both PM2.5, PM11. But then the issue there is basically, although we gain in environment, we know our economy and society, the impact on that, like during COVID, although we have seen blue skies, we have seen cleaner environment in Colombo, for example, during that period, we had very adverse impact on the society and the economy, meaning that this gain is not sustainable. In fact, we have seen it now in the economic revival process, we are going back to the normal. So therefore, what I achieved is a learning for us. It indicates that most of the pollution in urban sector is due to transport, but then you can't prevent transport, because when you have prevention of transport, that will have an impact on mobility, then that will have impact on society and the economy. So we have to see how we can safeguard the environment while contributing to social and economic development, that we have not, I think, captured the path yet. That's what we talk about, the sustainable, sustainable transport system. So those are some indicators for us to understand. So basically, what I mean there is basically there are many information we have to grasp. We have to understand these complex situations. These are not rocket sciences, but it's a complex situation. We have to understand the multidisciplinary nature and so on. This comprehension of transport in sustainable perspectives, sustainability perspectives, is the topic I have selected to indicate that the knowledge management is a key for us to go forward. So we are talking about knowledge development, knowledge sharing, and knowledge application, which will develop a knowledge people, learning organization or evolving organization, and inform society. When we have all these things in place in terms of transport sector, for example, only we can implement sustainable transport. So therefore, education of sustainable transport become an important element. I think you all are looking at that aspect. So I want to highlight that importance through the background thing I talked earlier. So these transformational changes are required, of course, when you look at the present situation. That means that we have to use variety of new tools, skills, knowledge, information, learning environment, of course, all the levels of education, not only universities, not only technical colleges, it's cutting across all the levels of education. That's the way we have to develop the education of sustainable transport. Of course, the university or tertiary education will be one of the key, but that's not sufficient to cater for this issue. So the issue there basically, when you look at that aspect in Sri Lanka, probably most of we are aware that we don't have data and information in transport. Very rarely we get complete data, almost nil. Sometimes we get data, but those are not quality assured. So you can't generate any information there. So therefore, many things we need to do, policy making, regulation making, or invention or research development, anything we want to do need data, but in Sri Lanka, we don't have data, we don't have information to do that. So that's one of the issues. Secondly, the competencies. We need competent people, I said earlier also. We need different type of competencies. We need cognitive, functional, attitudinal competencies, which has to be developed through education, that's the role of education. So therefore, when you develop your education plan, we have to address these competencies. We have to develop your curricula, your learning methods, the examination, everything in that line. Learning to know, learning to do, and learning to be are the competencies required by all people, especially the actors in transport. But not only them, even the general public who are using transport mode should also have some level of competencies, knowledge, and so on to tackle this situation. So therefore, the competency is an important thing. We recently did a study on that aspect, especially looking at the transport sector. The competencies we have in different, actors in Sri Lanka, from policy making to planning, implementation, operation. We have discussed. We have looked at the level of the actors, policymakers level, what you call strategic level actors, then tactical level actors, and also operational level actors. We have done a detailed study, and also we consulted educational, programs, universities, and other education institutions to understand this one. So this indicates one of the output indicate these are oral output to show that whether we have the competencies in our the actors to cater for sustainable transport. So we can see this green line are showing the satisfactory level of competencies. The other one, the darker one, shows the low level, means we have a gap. So we can see policy making and planning, we are quite okay. So we have good policies, we have good planning. When you look at implementation or operation, we can see we have very weak comparatively. So therefore, on the ground implementation of transport in general and sustainable transport in particular, we don't have capacity, mean that we have urgent need to build that capacity. So the overall, we can see here, we have 50-50. So we have a considerable area for improvement. This is the overall thing. So this is the role of education is indicated there. It's also interesting that how people so far learn about transport. Most of the people we survey had more than 50% had postgraduate qualification, around 1/4 undergraduate qualification, diploma, and so on. So all are educated people. But when you look at the way they learn the transport sector, it's not the technical or diploma level, it's not the undergraduate level, it's not the postgraduate level. They learn through occupation, mainly through seminars and workshops. Is one thing, something like what we do now. And also informal education through media, and also occupational, like through their job. These are the main mode of learning at present in our transport sector actors, meaning that our education, the formal education like school, undergraduate, postgraduate, even research, fail to cater for the capacity building. That indicate the need for education program, maybe school, undergraduate, even postgraduate, even research, more on mobility and transport for us to cater for this, sustainable development in transport. So therefore, I think this discussion, I think it's a very key, I think timely one, because all of you are looking at, I think, educational areas. But then we have to also look at this concept now. So the way we try to do this is, we have UNESCO, they have come up with a overall plan for education for sustainable development, equal ESD, education for sustainable development, which has been evolved through sustainable development itself. So there are certain methodology we can use. So this particular one we have used in Sri Lanka to develop a curricula on a similar intervention. So we have identified 6 levels of formal education: early childhood education, primary school, secondary school, tertiary university, technical vocation, and continuing professional development, short courses and other maybe programs, postgraduate and so on. And in addition, importance of informal and non-formal education is also very important. It's not a formal education, because people learn through informal and non-formal education. So we have to capture all these together. So we propose here basically, develop a curriculum by looking at this broader context, involving informal and non-formal education as a part of a formal education. When you develop a formal education program, let's say university, we have to see how you can use informal and non-formal education to facilitate, to enhance, to complement, to supplement the formal education. That's the only way we can teach sustainability concept within transport education. So that's the basis. So when you especially look at the tertiary and university, I think most of you are from that, you can come up with a more, the sound planning there, a curriculum framework. This is, again, we develop this type of approach for general education for sustainable development. I said that there are 3 competency levels: cognitive competency, learning to know; methodological competency or skill, learning to do; attitudinal competency, learning to be. All are important. We have to identify some corporate competencies. We have developed this one in your maybe a degree program, your courses, your short course. Identify these 3 levels of competencies. These categories, we can have more. Usually these competencies are further divided into 3 each. So we have 3 cognitive competencies, 3 methodological competencies, and 3 attitudinal competencies to have a very comprehensive education program. Then also we look at the program outcome. You develop the program, the core competencies to tackle program outcome. This for the overall education program. For a particular module, for a particular course, you can develop under this one also you can identify what are the topics for the thematic areas for sustainable transport. I'll show you very briefly what are the topics we can have. So those topics we can identify. There are 20-30 topics under which we can select certain topics for your education program. So then what you do there is basically select a particular module, let's say 1 credit, 2 credits, or maybe just a topic in a given module. So then we identify the, this is a subject, then we identify the topics. Then we look at, through the core competencies, we look at specific competencies for that particular subject, which are linked to the core competencies. Then for the learning outcome for the subject, we know that any curricula, we have learning outcomes. We align the learning outcome for program outcomes. That's we do the curriculum mapping. So when you have this overall, approach, these core competencies and program outcomes, so you set for a particular module, competencies, maybe few, learning outcomes, few, to cater for these competencies. So that's the way we develop a module. So I'm not going to go into detail there. I just want to show you that you can come up with relevant core competencies under cognitive, functional, or attitudinal competencies. They are described here, so that you can develop your course through these competencies. So you develop these competencies through the delivery of the program. And also you can identify many thematic areas. I have highlighted around 30 areas here. These are basically linked to transport and sustainable development or sustainable transport system. Development of mobility and transport, historical change of mobility and traffic, environment dimension of transportation, maybe mega cities. There are many things we talk about. Sustainable transport infrastructure, non-motor transport, mass transit options, intelligent transport system, then even intermodal transport, eco driving, many other things. So you can identify very broader content, even consumer rights and responsibilities, life cycle assessment, all are linked to transport. So then these are the broader context topics. You identify some of the key topics for you to develop your module. So that's the way we usually develop a module. And then to suit a particular degree program, particular short course, we can come up with a particular target group. You can come up with a module to suit with your final output. So that's the way you can develop it. And basically, in conclusion, I want to highlight that this type of broad approach can be used in education program where you don't need to teach transport as a separate subject. Here, mainly, we are talking about integrating the transport concept within the education program. So therefore, this transport concept, mobility concept, this concept we discuss here can be easily incorporated for any subject, irrespective of the level of study, the school, primary, secondary, or university, even early childhood education. You can capture some relevant topics there and integrate it to any subject. So therefore, the basic concept of sustainable transport is, of course, you can teach a subject on sustainable transport, but the meaning here is not that. You taught the transport in the context of development, and in fact, most of the subjects we taught are linked to development. Therefore, the transport can be easily integrated into an existing module. So that's the concept basically. But of course, for a particular area, particular discipline, you can come up with a very easy subject, of course. But then the basic life skill we want to develop are not catered by that type of subject. It's very technical. So here we have to look at a different way of teaching sustainable transport. Usually we talk about three main strategies. One is called entry strategy, where we include this topic of mobility or transport within existing module. Without changing the module, we teach subject of module, transport within that module. It's what you call the entry strategy. Then also we have what you call integration study, where we come up with a module, maybe 1 credit, maybe 2 credits, which is for a particular curricula, particular target group, maybe first year of undergraduate student, maybe last year, maybe mechanical, civil, whatever. So that's what you call integration study. Also, we have another approach called harmonization strategy, where we come up with a module which can be taught for any discipline. For example, let's say in a university, we have mechanical, we have civil, maybe chemical. You have a common module where anyone can sit together and then learn that. So in some of the universities, this approach has been already used in some other areas, not transport, but other areas in sustainability, where they have this common module for, of course, different faculties, different departments, different universities sometimes. So that type also can be done, where you will see the more the classroom will have more different type of disciplines, work together to achieve a common goal. So therefore, that's also another way of introducing the subject. So therefore, this comprehension for sustainable transport has to be done through the education, but that education doesn't mean formal education. It can start from early childhood education to school, primary, secondary school, then universities, and so on. There you can introduce as just a topic in other subjects, or we can introduce a new subject, or we can introduce a subject which is common for multi departments, multidisciplinary in nature. So therefore, there are many ways of introducing that one, the sustainable transport, so that this comprehension for sustainable transport can be achieved at national level, and thereby we can develop transport sector actors who can make decision, plan, implement, and monitor and improve the sustainable transportation. So that's the basic message I want to give, just highlighting the importance of sustainable or transport as a sustainable development concept. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. If there are any questions, it's time for you all to raise the question. So I have one question now. So in BRO, in Sri Lanka, it's only the measurement is PM value, right? Particulate matter, not only the other things like sulfur dioxide and any other things.
Miss Doctor, we have several level of measuring. Sri Lanka, we have very sophisticated air quality monitoring stations. Probably can remember that we had one long time. We had this fourth station. We had this CA1 station. But now in Sri Lanka, we have around 4 such stations. One in there are 2 in Colombo, station one in Central Environment Authority. So those stations can measure or are measuring multiple pollutants. PM10 and PM2.5 are the ones usually we use to communicate information, but we also measure SOx, NOx, ozone, other pollutants. So those are the sophisticated monitoring stations. So we have one in Colombo that is in CA premises, fixed station. The same model is there in Kandy in the bus station. Again, it's measured the same thing. It's a very sophisticated one. The second one, then we have mobile stations. One with they have placed that one in CMC, Colombo Municipal Council. They are measuring there, but it can move. It's in a vehicle, same equipment but mobile. ITI also they have mobile station. They are also monitoring all over the country. Presently, they are mainly monitoring air pollution around the coal power plant because the CB has to monitor the air quality level around the coal power plant, and they have hired. They have outsourced this activity for ITI, so they take this measurement regularly. But then they do the measurements other places also. So therefore, we have a few high quality ones. These can measure multiple sources. But in addition, there are some individual organizations. Some embassies, probably have seen those. They measure few, like PM10 and PM2.5 are very common. But there are a few others. They also measure SOx and NOx and so on. But then again, there are some plan to broad down a few more air quality measuring stations, around 3 to the country, and also CB. They are planning to buy 3 more to monitor the air quality around coal power plant. That will be installed around coal power plant, not here. But the other one will be probably procured by Ministry of Environment. Will be given for some of the institutions like ITI, CA, and NBRO to do this monitoring. So in addition, NBRO they also do passive sampling, which is very simpler, less accurate, but sufficient enough to understand the issue. So they do this analysis for multiple cities. That complement this the complex, the more sophisticated, more accurate data. So therefore, the presently NBRO, ITI, and CEA are the government agencies who are doing a considerable air quality measuring.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Any other questions from the participants?
So what are the mitigatory measures which have been taken to improve the air quality so far?
We have a action plan called Clean Air Action Plan, which is in fact first developed before like 1990s. We had the first one called Clean Air Action Plan 2000, then 2007, then 2015. First one is called Clean Air 2025 Action Plan. So that elaborate many interventions for air quality monitoring. Number one intervention is the vehicle emission control. So they are one of the actions we have taken, probably have seen, there is this vehicle emission testing program. It's only one activity. There are indicated, other activities there which has not happened that way. We are waiting for that. For example, fuel quality improvement. Then we have cleaner vehicles one, and then also we have some program on what you call this vehicle scrappage program. Very old vehicle which cannot be repaired to good air quality level, we have to scrap it. Then there are capacity building program, awareness program. There are many other programs has to happen, but this has not happened the way we require. But then there are other interventions. There are many other areas. For example, probably you are aware that there's a new regulations published by CEA to control the pollution from all the other sources. We call stationary sources emission standard, which has been gazetted now, and they are trying to implement now, which cover all the stationary sources, all the different equipment, all the pollutants, even open burning. So the regulations there is gazetted, is formalized or regularized. Only thing is we don't have capacity to enforce it. Partly for CEA, there are competencies of the staff, the equipment to monitor is is not sufficient. Secondly, when we implement that one, there will be impact on the industry because they should have the capacity to improve the pollution levels and so on. But then our technology, our capacity, our economy is not that level. So we want to see a kind of a progressive, what do you call this, to enforce this by stage-wise. That type of plan has not been happened yet. So we have a regulation not implemented, but vehicle regulation has been implemented. Probably it's not monitored properly. So we have a issue there. So therefore, for the last 3-4 years, we have seen even for the vehicle emission testing program, there's a deterioration there, and also the implementation of the station sources is also not there. In addition, there are other things like, for example, we have one activity going for the ozone depletion. There's a activity going on now. Then also chemical, pollution, hazardous pollution, and there's another activity going for. Recently, there's a study just completed for hospital. Basically, this healthcare waste management, and there'll be some activities coming up there. So there are some activities going on, which are basically handled by Ministry of Environment, and also some agencies like Ministry of Health. They are looking at this the hospital waste management and so on. So there's some progression, but still, I mean, look at the air quality level, especially some like we are talking about few pollutants, but there are other pollutants like heavy metals, asbestos, maybe mercury. There are many other hazardous pollutants which are not properly monitored. So therefore, we don't know because most of the pollutants are not visible. So therefore, even clean air is not visible, and there are pollutants which are not possible. Most of the pollutants. So therefore, by seeing a clean environment, we don't it's not really you can't say it's clean unless you measure it. So therefore, we have a gap there. So especially in the air quality, there's a serious issue because most of these I think chemicals like mosquito coil, and then this incense we use, perfumes, many other things we use are very hazardous. So there are health impacts. So but we don't monitor that. So and we don't have data. So there are some limited studies, but those are not sufficient. So therefore, that's why we have now a development of an India quality guideline about to publish. So that will have some. It's not a regulation, but a guideline for the community to understand how to manage this India pollution. So there's some activities. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any improvement in the air quality after introducing this emission testing certificate?
Yeah, we have been in fact, we had limited data, so we have been monitoring PM10 and PM 2.5 for a long period, and especially we launched this program in 2008. That's in Western Province, and it took around 3-4 years to implement the whole country. In 2011 and 2012, the whole country was covered. So when you look at the air quality in Colombo, especially, we have seen the decrease in PM level even with increase in traffic. So that indicates that, and also when we have in fact, video the roadside, the smoke levels of different vehicles. So when we compare before 2008 and after 2008 till maybe 4-5 years, like by 2015 and so on, we have seen a considerable improvement in the performance of vehicles even by looking at the smoke. However, for the last 3-4 years, we have seen a decremental thing. We have seen more and more smoky vehicles now. And also, of course, one reason is we have more vehicles on the road too, except for this lockdown period. So therefore, there's a deterioration. But in general, I think there's a deterioration in the vehicle emission testing program too, because of the lack of monitoring and enforcement. So that has to be happen in a more aggressive manner. So that's also, I think, one reason. So therefore, there's impact. Still, there's impact there. If we didn't have this one program, we could have much worse. Probably can remember that earlier we have very blacky smoke vehicle. Now we don't rarely see that, but then but we see now more frequently smoky vehicles, not very badly one, but smoky vehicles. So we need more comprehensive monitoring and enforcement, even this vehicle emission testing program. And also what the testing procedure we use for vehicle emission testing program is not to measure the emission. It's basically very light standard, which indicate whether your vehicle is maintained properly. It's a yes no type. You can't measure the, you can't predict the emission. It's just saying that whether this vehicle has a good, with the repair or maintenance. So if it's not repaired or maintenance, we ask them to repair and maintenance, come back and test it. They can pass. It's a very light standard. Now, after now almost 12 years, now we have to go for a more stringent standard. There we have to use what we call chassis dynamic testing, driving cycle. There are other tools. So therefore, what we are using here, probably you are aware that in vehicle importation, now we have Euro system, Euro 5, Euro 6 level, and so on. We are going that one, but then our vehicle emission testing program are not compatible with Euro system. Their testing is much different and more accurate, which even can measure NOx and SOx and so on. So therefore, the methodology we are using is less accurate. Starting is okay, but now we have to go for more accurate systems. But then secondly, even we need, even for present one, we need more, regulatory system or the enforcement. So we need improvement for our vehicle emission testing program that level, and also we need education awareness. There are many other capacity building program also there. Also, we have to accredit garages. That's also we develop accreditation procedure. It never happened because we have to accredit the garages to indicate whether they are suitable to repair a vehicle for emission. So most of the time it's not the case. They just repair without looking at the emission aspect. So therefore, the accreditation of garages is a part of that capacity building. Then we have to have education program, licensing of testing, technicians, all are there, but nothing has happened as part of the program. Only what we have is presently 2 companies doing the testing. So that's there are people doing it, but not the supportive system. So therefore, there are gaps. Yes.
Thank you very much.
So there's another question in the chat box.
Right. Let me see. Can you read it? All right, it's there. So there are transportation sustainability rating system in the world to measure the sustainable in transport project. But the drawback that can be seen in them is these rating systems are very much subjective. Is it possible to develop a rating system by eliminating that? Yes. Yeah, in fact, that's so that we have highlighted the key elements. In fact, we have developed when I was in Sustainable Development Authority, we developed that type of tools not only for transport, like buildings. Now it's already there now. Then transport systems, and then even for food products. Those concepts are there. As you said, those definitely even sustainable development goals are global one. We have localized it. So similarly, any these indicators are global one, and they have the framework. So we can adapt it. First things we have to localize in terms of the indicators and also the methodology. That has to happen. So that's where I think the key, agencies should come together and do that. It's happening in different way. For example, now we are just started the activity to develop a energy fuel economy label for transport, 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler, and cars, petrol, diesel, light duty vehicles. So it's called fuel economy label. You know that we have a label for this CFL light the eco energy label. We have 5 stars, so that's the only appliance which has label so far, which is done by SLSI and Sustainable Energy Authority. They are preparing labels for few others. Next one would be, it's finalized now. It will come now within a couple of months for ceiling fans, energy label. Then pedestal fan and ceiling fan, smaller ceiling fans also under development. Then we have LED bulbs. We have a label. Then the refrigerator, there's a label developed and so on. So there are some appliances. There's a roadmap for energy label. Now this energy label, we have a criteria. So we develop that criteria by looking at the global one and then adopt the local context. Even ceiling fans, we have developed a criteria to give marks and then give the label. So therefore, this type of criteria indicators are very well known, common. But as you said, we have to adopt it. So therefore, it can be a maybe even research project. We can do that. There are in fact MScs and PhDs done for that. Very recently, there's one of our students in Motor University from civil department. He has developed energy, rather what you call the indicator, what you call this type of rating system for sustainable public transport. So by looking at the safety, regulation, policy, all are there. So there's a tool now developed there, but these are basically research level. But then in order to make it formalized, we had to usually consult a government authority. For example, it's an energy related one, we have Sustainable Energy Authority. If it's a label, it's a SLSI, Sri Lanka Standard Institute, they can get involved in other agencies. For example, this vehicle, what we call this energy label, where full economy label, there will be 5 stars there. So there we are going to work with the major agencies will be Sustainable Authority, Sri Lanka Standard Institute, Department of Motor Traffic and Ministry of Transport. They will get together and there will be usually we appoint a national committee, a technical committee. They develop this criteria indicator. This indicator, the framework and also the rating system is developed by this national committee. So now we had this national committee for ceiling fan, then for the CFL, then for refrigerator, computer, laptop, LED. So all were done by committee, expert committee, comprising of all these experts as well as government agencies. So usually they work for around 6 months to 1 year to develop this rating system. So these are different rating systems, but presently we don't have a rating system established for transportation. So what I'm talking here is for vehicles. That is not the system, but the individual like appliance thing. So, but then probably aware that we have this, for industries, maybe commercial establishments, we have energy rating systems like green building and so on. So these are very similar. So, but these are adopted the local context too. Yeah. So therefore, there's a requirement. So if you are interested in this one, probably you can do research and so on. There are a lot of deliberations are required, and during that process, we have to consult all these stakeholders to understand, to capture the key areas of intervention, and then also identify the indicators that also depend upon the data availability, because sometimes there are very sophisticated indicators, but we don't have data. So localization is important. So therefore, this sustainability index for transport projects, or maybe a particular subsystem, whatever, probably can come out that. Presently, in central bank, they have developed what they call are being developed called sustainable financing taxonomy. That is basically to understand whether a project, even transport project, is qualified for sustainable financing. So this is what we call sustainability finance taxonomy, which has this type of a indicator, looking at many areas. One is carbon emission, GHG emission. Other one is air quality, safety. All are there. You can, if you want, you can refer that one in Europe and other global financial agencies. They have this called sustainable financing taxonomy. That is looking at similar thing, projects, any project to qualify whether it's suitable for sustainable financing. They have this rating system. So they have to follow that rating system to get a mark, to get a pass to qualify for financing. So it's been developed for our financial institution by central bank. But then already this type of sustainable financing taxonomy with a rating system are there in Europe, for example. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone, any last one or two questions? So in the absence of further questions, I would like to invite Dr. Tushar from University of Moratuwa to propose vote of thanks. Dr. Tushar.
Thank you, Dr. Ilesha. I hope I'm audible. Dear sir, it was a privilege listening to your online lecture titled Comprehension of Transportation in Sustainability Perspectives. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the knowledge you shared with us. Further, I like to thank those who participated with the discussion. It completed the objective of ours. And I would like to acknowledge that this program is supported by Sri Lanka Association for Advancement of Science and the Open University Sri Lanka and EUSL Energy Project. While once again thanking all of you, I may forward few words about the EUSL Energy Project since it may not be familiar to most of you, unlike SLAS and the Open University. EUSL Energy Project is an European funded project where 4 Sri Lankan universities, including the Open University, and 2 European universities and 3 educational tech companies work together to build 100% online, stackable and affordable master degree in energy circular economy. And I once again, I thank you for, Sir, Dr. Sugatapala, sir, for your valuable input. And also I thank all of the people attended in our session. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all. Good night.
Okay, then we'll wind up the session for today. And so with this, we are starting, Tushar, we are starting, this is the first one, EUSL Energy Project Knowledge Dissemination. And this is the first webinar on that, right? Thank you very much, sir, for your time again.